All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining. My name's Jeff Standridge, and I serve as the Managing Director of the Conductor, and I want to welcome you all to Game Changers. As many, if not most of you know, this is Global Entrepreneurship Week, and we are very blessed to have a very active global entrepreneurship network across the state. I've been told that we're hosting more events this week in the spirit of Global Entrepreneurship Week than any other state in the union, and so very proud to hear that. Today, we have a very special guest with us today for our Game Changers event. We've got Governor Asa Hutchinson. You all know Governor Hutchinson as our 46th governor, elected in 2018, again, with 65% of the votes, more than any gubernatorial candidate in history. He served as a U.S. attorney, 3 successive terms in Congress, and also as director of the DEA. You know, he hails from Gravette, Arkansas, and he and our First Lady, Susan, have been married for 47 years. Governor Hutchinson, it is such a pleasure and honor to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for your leadership and partnership. You've made a real difference for our state in terms of entrepreneurship and mentoring, and so I'm delighted to be with you today.
Well, thank you so much. What I'd like to do is just go ahead and jump in, and we'll get the opportunity to talk about Governor Hutchinson in a few moments. What I'd like to do, maybe something you don't do a lot, is let's talk a little bit about Asa Hutchinson, the person. Could you maybe talk a little bit, take us from your early days? I talked a little bit about your background and your home, but take us through a little more of that in your pre-gubernatorial career, perhaps.
Well, actually, I'd love to have that opportunity, so thanks for asking. And if you can't come into the governor's office, you will see immediately to the left a shoe shine kit. And that shoe shine kit was my first business. I shined at Johnny's Barbershop as about a 6th grader, and then I sold the business. I even got some goodwill out of it. So that was my first experience in entrepreneurship. But as you know, I grew up in a small town. My dad was a poultry cattle farmer. It was just a wonderful time growing up in rural Arkansas on the Spavinaw Creek. My mom and dad had a high school education, so they're very blue collar. I was the youngest of 6 kids. I joke that mom and dad were just tired of raising kids by the time I came along. And we had a little bit more freedom than they have these days. I was one of these guys that took a little while to figure out exactly the direction I wanted to go. I was, when I got out of high school, I wasn't sure about college, and I was said, hey, you got to go to college. And I picked my major because it was the first letter of the alphabetical list of majors. It was accounting. 4 years in accounting, I said, I think I got my accounting degree, but I went to law school because I fell in love with that. So life's just sort of changed for me as I went along. After Fayetteville Law School, I went to Bentonville, practiced law, and man, I got to see some entrepreneurs up close at hand. Sam Walton, right down the street, I got to know him. My law partner was one of his good friends, and so those kind of experiences is seeing entrepreneurship in action. Of course, I went to high school, and there we just went back and celebrated the Jones Center, Harvey and Ernest Jones. They created Jones Truck Line, ultimately sold it, and they created so many different philanthropic activities as a result of that. So I've grown up around entrepreneurship. Now, what a lot of people don't know about me is that people look at me and say, my goodness, he's been in public service all of his life, which is, blessed because it's been 4 decades. But the fact is I've done a lot on the, in the private business world, partly because I've lost a few races and I had to make a living. And that's a joy going in and out of public service. And so in 1980, I put Bentonville's first FM radio station on the air. I got an FCC license. I built a tower. We put all the equipment in. It was a magical time of entrepreneurship. And so, I had a great experience in starting up a business from the very ground floor. And then, as you know, my public career, but whenever I left Congress, I left the Bush administration after 4 years. I actually ran for governor and lost in 2006. And so I am in the private sector serious time then. And I had some really nice opportunities that I was grateful for. Some colleagues of mine coming out of Homeland Security, we set up a fund, $80 million to acquire a Homeland Security investment. And boy, that was a new experience for me. It's actually going on, doing the road show on Wall Street, raising some money, going up to Connecticut. And, we successfully raised that money. It wasn't the best time for investments necessarily, but we did well on that. And those are just some of the entrepreneurial side of me that many people don't know about. But I've spent over 25 years in the private sector, enjoyed every minute of it. People ask, well, what are you going to do when you leave public service? Well, who knows? But the private sector is always an option.
Absolutely it is. And you probably experienced firsthand what a lot of our entrepreneurs experience. It's very difficult to chase investors and customers at the same time.
That's right. Do it one at a time. I mean,
that's right.
Investments, and then you got to line up those customers. But
yeah. So did you always know that you wanted to have a role in public service or in government service?
I didn't actually. As I said, growing up, it was the furthest thing from my mind. I wasn't exposed to that in life. But then through the experience of going to law school, through the experience of my faith, which just instructs us to make a difference in life and be a good steward of your talents, your time here, that leads you into a lot of different areas that you can make a difference. And one of those areas is in the public arena. And so that was the motivating cause, is to impact people's lives. But I didn't really strike me until, I was out of law school. I was, in Bentonville practicing law, and it was a tough time in the political environment if you're a Republican, a little bit different than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
We had to go through those struggles in life. But my public service came about through my desire to impact our communities. And then secondly, it came about through perseverance and having those opportunities that came to me actually a little bit later in life when I got elected to Congress when I was age 46 and was able to continue on.
If you were to think back over your early days, in the early days of your career, even, it could have been pre-career, in the early days of your career, is there somebody out there that you talked about having an impact and being a good steward? Is it somebody that had a good, a heavy impact on your life, your career, that you could maybe talk a little bit about, and why?
There's a number of people, but, of course, in terms of values, I've got to look back to my dad, who taught me some very simple values growing up with a farm. Do your work, clean up your mess, but also it was the whole concept that we're not a respecter of persons, and that everyone has the same gift of life, and we all have the same challenges. And those values really, really make a difference as you go through life and you see the ups and downs. In the public arena, former Congressman Ed Bethune, who represented the 2nd Congressional District. He ran for the U.S. Senate in 1984 and lost to David Pryor. But I loved watching him because, he seized the moments and ran tough races, was a great leader in service. And then as he lost his last race, he went back in and practiced law. He represented people. He made a living. So, that resilience and being able to go in to the public arena, but then also go out in the private arena and realize that life doesn't end. Life is good.
Yeah.
And, we can pick up where we left off.
That's good. That's good. I always say that, my mother has the work ethic of a U.S. Marine. And so she sets the example every day in that regard. So I understand that. What about characteristics? You've had a lot of opportunities to lead large groups of people from your administration all the way back to certainly when you were with the DEA, large numbers of people either directly reporting to you or reporting to you through your organization and through others. Do you have any kind of critical characteristics that you believe strong leaders must possess or do possess?
I do, and some people will disagree with this because there's many different styles of leadership. But if a leader is not an encourager, then you're missing the boat. And I love my good friend Vice President Mike Pence, and I see him, and he says he's always encouraging. He says, "My pastor tells me that people are under encouraged." And
Yeah.
so much truth to that. We walk around in life. And as a leader, you've got to remember that the people who are sacrificing to make you successful, to make your team successful, they need encouragement. And so I think it's a very, very important quality of a leader is to give that encouragement. If you don't have that, you're missing something. The other thing is the ground truth, and this is nothing novel, but I just love reading about Sam Walton and his management style. And of course, it's management by walking around. I love the stories of him going into the Walmart stores in Iowa on a hunting trip and, getting out back in the truck and meeting with Don Serdequist and making a few notes and saying, this needs to be corrected, this needs to be corrected. When he goes in the office on Monday morning, he knew exactly what was happening in the Walmart stores. In the same way, whether you're in business, if you don't know the needs of the customer and how the customers are being treated, and whether your business model is meeting the needs of those customers, you can't be successful. And you can only learn that by being there on the ground and seeing what's happening. And, I take that principle into government as well, but I think it starts in the business world.
That's good. That's good. I appreciate that. Is there one particular mistake or negative characteristic, if you will, that you see more frequently than others in leadership?
Maybe it's a failure to encourage.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I know you're looking for something different there. There's I tell the story of Newt Gingrich, and Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House whenever I was in Congress, and I was working on some legislation, and he didn't like it. The leadership didn't like it. They wouldn't let it go anywhere. It was a freshman bill. What's these freshmen doing, offering legislation? And so I was actually driving. I put in a call to the speaker and said, I'd like to visit with you about this. And so he returned a call from New Hampshire during a summer break, and I'm going to a soccer game in Conway. Mm. So he's on, and of course, those are the days I think I had a bag phone. He's yelling at me on the phone. He said, Asa, if you bring this legislation forward, you're going to bring our majority down. It's going to cost us. It is going to be awful. What in the world are you doing? What do you do when somebody yells back?
You tend to yell back at them.
Yell back at them. So I started yelling on the phone and saying, Mr. Speaker, if you don't understand the importance of this issue, then you're going to bring the majority down. It's going to cost us seats. And so you hang up the phone, you're just shaking. It was such an intense call. I go back to Washington after the break, and the speaker brings everybody together for our conference, and he announces that Congressman Hutchinson's freshman bill is going to be brought to the floor. It's going to form the base bill of all of our debate. And so I saw him later, and I said, well, Mr. Speaker, thank you for doing that. And he says, well, Asa, we had such a good conversation on the other day. And so the point of the story is passion.
Yeah.
And encouragement is a part of it. You have to have passion in your leadership, and some people look at that, and that's the best illustration I could see of someone.
That's great. That's fantastic. I appreciate that. Let's shift gears if we can now. Let's talk about Governor Asa Hutchinson and talk about our state of Arkansas. What do you, and I know this is a crazy time, and what you might have said in January could be different than today, given the circumstances. But what do you think is the biggest economic opportunity for our state today? perhaps?
Well, it has to be, partly manufacturing. We got a little stymied because of the pandemic, but we have businesses in the pipeline ready to build manufacturing sites here in Arkansas. And we've continued many of these announcements even during the pandemic. So we're ready to go in that area. And I think there'll be increased emphasis, in the years to come. And Arkansas is well positioned for that. Secondly, it is the tech industry. And I think we've actually, in the last 6 years, made a fairly significant leap forward in showing the world that we can have micro hubs of technology companies located here, and the expansions that we see are extraordinary. And so I think that is an opportunity that's going to continue. It's going to build. It's going to get stronger. And, we've got some work to do in all of those areas, but I feel like we're over a little bit of a hump, and we've convinced a lot of people, and now we just need to showcase those opportunities and to capitalize on it.
Very good, very good. And I agree with you. We have begun to make a name for ourselves outside the state, even for the opportunities for these micro locations, if you will, of tech hubs and tech businesses. Let's flip the coin. And outside of the pandemic, which we all know brings its own economic constraints, what would you say is a challenge facing us in the future economically for the state of Arkansas?
Well, whenever you're looking at a challenge for us, I think we've overcome a large part of our image issues, but it is, I think, education is still a continued challenge that we face. And, we've, have been set back some because of our pandemic, and everybody has, but, we can't do our testing. How can we measure, and we're not seeing progress because we're doing so much virtual, we're in and out. I mean, we're struggling. So, and that's a nationwide problem, but whenever you start out behind in education in the lower rung, you've got to convince people that, we're up to snuff in it. We're making the improvements in education. We're being innovative. And I think we're doing that, but I think that's a challenge for us in the future, is to continue that emphasis and not losing sight of the importance of strengthening education in Arkansas.
Very good. And you certainly set the curve, if you will, with regard early in your administration with the computer science initiative. And that's been something that as an entrepreneur and as an entrepreneurial developer, we talk about talent, and the building of that pipeline of talent is critical for us. So I appreciate your perspective on that.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, and we haven't announced the numbers yet, and we'll probably announce those later this week or next week. But even during this very, very difficult time, we continue to see an increase in computer science students that are enrolled. Mm-hmm. So we are leading the nation in terms of a comprehensive program, one of the leaders nationally, and we're going to strengthen this more. So stay tuned. Well, we've already announced it, but we're going to not just offer computer science at every high school. We're going to make sure that it's a requirement for graduation. And so that will build, and we'll be the first state to do that, that it's an actual requirement. And, you can use it as a math or a science credit for graduation, but everybody has to have a computer science course to graduate from high school. Now, I'm asking the legislature to do that. We'll need some people's help, but I think that's another step, as well as increasing our computer science teachers in the classroom.
You certainly got a number of accomplishments like that over your administration, over your tenure as governor. Any particular things that you're most proud of?
Well, it's that, and yeah. I talked about it, but I actually think about that from time to time, and you could look at lowering our tax rate, mm-hmm. making a huge reversal in the trend of taxation in Arkansas. By next January, we'll be down to 5.9% individual income tax rate. Mm-hmm. And that's something I'm very pleased with, and a legacy issue, but it's also about our new highway funding. And by the way, everyone, thank you. At least 55% of you voted for fund that gives us a good highway program, a growth plan for the future. So those are all great, but when it comes down to really making a difference in lives and our future, I think it has to be in the tech area. It has to be in the computer science initiative that's been so successful.
Just in a snippet, I want to give you a moment here. I hear a lot of people talk about during the election, prior to the election, why would we make a sales tax permanent? Why would we make that change? Talk a little bit from your perspective about the perspective of infrastructure and economic development and how that, a little bit about that relationship.
Well, I mean, we're underfunded in our roads. Every study indicates that. We've never had a long-term funding plan, and it was a serious objection that people raised. It deserved a debate and an honest answer, and that is that this did not have a sunset, but it is a long-term tax. And the reason for that is that there's no sunset clause on highway maintenance.
Yeah.
It is an ongoing need, and particularly whenever you're a growing state like Arkansas, and we are growing in terms of people moving here. So it was very necessary to have that long-term funding. And a practical matter, the planners, those that negotiate the contracts, if you know what you've got 20 years down the road, it makes it easier for you to plan the next year. And so the long-term funding allows for savings in terms of not having to bond. You can pay as you go, and you can plan better. So all of those reasons, to me, justified that. And I'm glad the voters agreed.
Yeah, and certainly when you think about the opportunity you mentioned earlier of manufacturing and transportation is one of the huge factors there. Are they going to be able to get their raw materials in and their finished products out as well?
Everybody wants the Texas market.
Yeah.
And when we can show them we've got interstates all the way into the Texas market, we've got access, 4-lane roads, that is a recruiting tool. And then this issue one sets Arkansas apart. It sets Arkansas apart from other states to have this kind of robust funding that we can show and demonstrate that kind of capacity in the future.
Let's shift now to specifically entrepreneurship and small business. We've touched on it a little bit. Are there any goals upcoming over the next couple of years that you or your administration have for entrepreneurial development, small business development in the state?
It's important to me for small business development that we give as much latitude, freedom, and a reduced regulatory environment on our small business folks. Mm-hmm. That's the best thing a government can do, is to get out of your way and to help you be successful by giving you room to run. And so that's one of the reasons it's important to reduce that tax burden. It's also important to reduce licensure requirements. And we're really looking at, we've already improved it a great deal, but I'm challenging all of our agencies to make it easier for people to move into Arkansas and to have reciprocity for their license, for their professional license. Or if it's a skilled trade, make it easier. And if somebody's coming out of school and they want to have a trade or a skill, make it easier to get that license. The tech, I don't think we have any licenses for tech folks. And I say amen to that. You're going to either make it or not make it. And people are going to know your skill level very quickly. I don't think we need to protect others to have a license to be a tech worker. Yeah. It's just an example of where let's make it a friendly state for the small businesses. And then, of course, we have to be able to have access to the capital. The talent pool is where people should like Arkansas, because you have that talent pool. And what happens is that we'll have our startup entrepreneurs, and once they get to a level, they're out of here because the capital is on each of the coasts or their talent is there. And we've got to overcome that. And that's why we're investing in talent, and we're all pulling together to have greater capital access.
Very good, very good. Any other challenge? I know you just mentioned capital, and any other challenges you see on the horizon for small business that we're going to need to address, certainly legislatively and or just through policy, good policy?
Well, this is something might be a curve for you, but whenever you're talking about recruiting tech talent, it's a diverse population that you want to bring here that has the entrepreneurial spirit, and we have to demonstrate that we are a tolerant, that we're going to understand and we're going to protect the different diversity of our culture by specific action. And that's why I've asked the legislature to pass hate crimes legislation. So it's only one of only 3 states in the nation that does not have a hate crime law. Well, if you're trying to recruit someone to small town Arkansas, and if they're a minority, that's a hurdle.
Yeah.
And it sends a good signal, and we've got to send some good signals out of here. And so I'm raising that issue because it's a heavy lift for the legislature. And I hope that you'll be a young voice, entrepreneurial voice saying that does make a difference to us. So speak to your legislature about that.
Absolutely. Very good. I'd like to shift, if we could, to some questions that we've taken from across the community, the Central Arkansas and even all the way to North Arkansas community, that folks that are engaged with us as the conductor. And I'd start with number 1, Jimmy Warren, who's from here in Conway, works in Pulaski County. Jimmy asked, in this year alone, we've seen a national pandemic, racial tension, economic uncertainty, and periods of hopelessness. Is there a message of inspiration that you would deliver to Arkansas that we're looking for brighter days? What would that message be?
Jimmy always asks the tough questions, and Jimmy,
yes, he does.
Is serving on my my task force for advancement of law enforcement, which I'm very grateful for his participation and leadership on that. And it's a great question. And the a little bit of the flippant answer might be a vaccine, is what I hope. And there's truth to that. But we get hope from our strength and the strength from others. And so we have to focus every day on being a neighbor and supporting each other and not pulling each other down, but pulling each other up and saying, let's get through this together. And it's not just a pandemic, but it's also some of the hopelessness that goes with it, some of the drug addictions that go with it. I'm very proud of our recovery community that is more dynamic than ever, that has a powerful message that's really reaching out to those struggling with addiction and helping them. And we're investing in that. We're going to continue to focus on those areas. And so to me, it's just being a good neighbor, helping each other, and realizing hope comes from the strength we have from each other.
Very nice. Very good. Thank you. This question comes from Amy Hopper. Amy Hopper works for Innovate Arkansas and runs the Delta I Fund. She's in Little Rock. Many states focus on traditional economic development through recruiting industry, while others have focused on entrepreneurial development, 2 different sides of the economic development coin. What do you see as AEDC's time split between traditional economic development and entrepreneurship? And do you see that changing one way or the other in the coming years?
It is a super question and one we need to think about every day. But when I started as governor, the sole focus of AEDC, almost by design and structure, organization, and philosophy, was we pursue manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
And under Mike Preston's leadership, we've adjusted that. I said, tourism happens to be the 2nd leading industry in Arkansas. We need to be supportive of that arena as well. And then we got significantly involved in changing the course of AEDC through entrepreneurial activities. And so, we made it the investment of $1 billion a year in our accelerator program that supports the startup community and brings talent from across the globe. Jeff, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's through our AEDC programs. And then for the data center for analytics, a number of different AEDC programs and research initiatives, we have broadened the focus much beyond simply manufacturing. Manufacturing is still important, but if you divide it up time-wise, I suspect the vast amount of time, the majority of time, is still spent in the traditional expansion areas. But it's a growing level of programs. In fact, in the budget this year, some of those startup pilot programs in the accelerator community and the research community, data analytics, all of that is moving and becoming a permanent part of our budget, as I'm recommending. And so we're seeing some shifts, and I think that's the right thing to do. I will add too, another shift is, you mentioned tourism. Military installations is a big part of our economy here in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we have the Military Affairs Committee. We have staffing support to support our communities, to support our installations. So we look at it much broader in terms of economic development. We're still not doing enough because so much of the small entrepreneur is on your own. I mean, we got to, we want to support by talent. We want to support by the research help, but there's a limit as to what can be done there.
Well, and being involved in that accelerator community and the Board of Science and Technology, I want you to know that, just speaking on behalf of the entrepreneurs that I get to interact with and the entrepreneurial support organizations, we appreciate the focus that you've placed on providing accelerator funding, but we also appreciate the fact that you involve yourself personally in going and visiting those cohorts and speaking with them. And I think each of them would say that to have the governor there recognizing the importance of that, it's important to provide monetary support, but also to provide the personal support that the importance of it is critical as well. So we appreciate that. Doug Hutchings is an entrepreneur from Fayetteville, and he says, the recent establishment of the Innovation Council sends a strong signal of the importance of innovation in creating economic opportunities for Arkansans. How can industries of all sizes lean in to support the efforts of the Innovation Council and other similar organizations?
I'm glad you asked that. And I think the answer is that, the Innovation Council is a number of thought leaders. It is trying to shape Arkansas in the tech arena, looking at what some other states have done from a structural standpoint. But I envision the other part of the tech councils as being really the local entrepreneurs that share ideas, that they encourage one another. It's part of a community. And so I would suggest that the next step is that we have local hubs that just start it up, get your entrepreneurs together, invite them. And from that, you form a small organization, and it's a council that supports each other and builds the ecosystem. And then you have that in different parts. All of a sudden, you strengthen the entire state innovation council.
Very good. Matt Faulkner from Searcy is a small business owner and says, what are some specific ways smaller towns can aid the state in developing innovative technology, an innovative technology ecosystem? And are there any specific areas or niches that our small rural communities or just even smaller communities can help with?
Well, I know that's a challenge, but you've got to look for ways. And the first thing is, and there's broad support for this, and that's increasing our investment in rural broadband. Once we get more broadband out, high speed in our rural communities and in the rural areas of our state, then entrepreneurship can follow because once you have that access, it opens doors. But secondly, there are some creative ways to do it. In Newport, I was up there to open their tech hub. I'm not sure I got the name exactly right there, Jeff. Do you remember that?
I know exactly what you're talking about, but it's working with the Office of Skills Development, and the tech hub is the best thing I can think of at the moment. Sorry, I didn't help you there.
But they did that right there in Newport. That's a rural area. They've got some specific missions to accomplish. You've got industry there. And so that's a great example of local community just saying we can do it too. And then we got support for our Center from Data Analytics that made Let's see where it goes from there.
I'm going to flip down to a question that's related to that. This is coming from a UCA MBA student. She says initiatives like the Arkansas Coding Academy, the Arkansas Center for Data Sciences, et cetera, help to fill gaps in the workforce development as a state. Do you have any plans to support and expand other initiatives in Arkansas, like the Coding Academy, in the future?
One of the recommendations of my computer science task force, the second version, was we've got to do more in our post-high school education arena. And it either by computer science degrees and elevating those, or by our tech academies. And so I'm very proud of the Coding Academy there at UCA. I know that other institutions have variations, but that's really an important part of building the workforce that we need, including apprenticeship programs. And very grateful for the industry. By the way, my son, I keep saying that, my grandson, Asa the fourth, he's 6'7" and pretty good basketball player at Drury University, but he is now majoring in computer science game design. Very serious about it. He's a junior there. And so he's looking for those apprenticeship opportunities. And, you know, we provided a couple ideas, but those are the kind of things that bring talent here that is an opportunity for us as well.
That's great. Katie Thompson runs the Science Venture Studio up in Fayetteville. She's from Springdale, and she says, what are some of the steps that the state will take in the coming years to ensure that the science and technology startups will continue to grow and become more sustainable in Arkansas?
Right. So I'll present you with an idea, and you all can measure whether you like it or not.
Okay.
I mentioned that, you know, we're moving down next year to 5.9% our state income tax rate for every Arkansan. I would like for us to go ahead and to grant a income tax rate of 4.9%. 4.9% for new residents of Arkansas for the next 5 years. Now, what that does is it's a recruiting tool for tech talent. It's a recruiting tool for anybody who's wanting to get out of the big cities, and there's a whole bunch of them, wanting to come look at a place like Arkansas. And this is just another recruiting tool, an incentive tool. And you say, as some of the legislators say, well, how does that help my residents back home? Well, you've got to explain that it's a two-step process. If you want to lower the rate for every Arkansan to 4.9%, we have to grow our economy to get there. So let's start by moving people here, getting people here, growing our economy. That helps us all to get to that goal. Now, anyway, that's an idea that I presented to the legislature. It makes sense to me, but it's a little bit of a hard sell because the average Arkansan out there says, what does that do for me?
Right.
Thinking process to say, well, that's good for all of us down the road.
Well, and that's another example of that I've experienced of the difference in economic development and entrepreneurial development. While they are both very, very critical, one is more of a marathon than the other. You can get, you know, you can announce, and you just announced today, jobs in the Jonesboro area, and you can get 100, 150, 200 jobs very quickly. And, you know, the process of wealth building and startups is usually more efficient than that in terms of the size of the company and the amount of wealth that's created relative to the number of jobs. But, and I think that's sometimes lost in the conversation, is that both are critical and one's a little more of a marathon than the other, so to speak. Let's see, Jeff Amorine. You know, Jeff, the founding managing director of Startup Junkie. He's been in the entrepreneurial ecosystem building for a long, long time. And he says, as it relates to small business and entrepreneurial support, what are the state's top 3 budget priorities?
Well, it would be some of the things that I've already mentioned, which is reduce the regulatory burden, to give greater access to capital, and to make sure that we build a talent pool in Arkansas. These are priorities in terms of overall policy initiatives. You know, the question was specifically about budget priorities, and I think it is to build those accelerator programs, those research programs into our base, so we know that it's there even beyond when I'm governor, be able to continue those initiatives. I think we also have to look at, you know, we've got some one-time money there. You know, if there's investments, you know, it was mentioned about the Coding Academy. we ought to look at workforce training, which is buying, machines, welding and skills that we could develop that way. Well, we also ought to be looking at how do we invest in another coding academy or a program that will help our tech workers get the skills that they need. So I think we have to, through the Office of Skills Development, through our workforce training, continue to emphasize that skill building. And this is a unique opportunity. And there are some things that are in the budget that will make it easier for us to utilize our scholarship money for tech programs, for students that are out of high school but need to get back in to reskill people. And so we have a number of initiatives that helps us in the reskilling of workers, because you think about our unemployment was 3.5%, and now we're at 7-point-something%. There's a lot more unemployed, and some of these unemployed are highly skilled workers. They just need to be reskilled because they might have lost their gig economy job. They might have lost the employment at some company. And so these are opportunities in the tech field for us to reskill them as well.
Very good. Very good. Well, I would like to close out with one question. This is our Game Changers event, as you know, and we have lots of leaders, entrepreneurs, and many times students who are involved, particularly because of the Conductor's very close relationship with the University of Central Arkansas. But we have students who join us from all over the state as well. If you would leave us with one nugget, if you will, one piece of gold, leadership advice that perhaps people are listening that you think would be appropriate in the moment, that would be great.
Well, I'll just offer the advice and determine whether that's a nugget worth keeping or not. But it's based upon my life experience, and it is simply this: that remember that life unfolds in unexpected ways, so be prepared to seize the moment. Now, let me just elaborate on that for a second. We don't know what's ahead, and some people are planners, and you try to plan 10 years, 20 years. I've never been able to do that. And so I've been able to adjust and move in different directions, but the key is being prepared to do that and willing to take those risks. But life unfolds in unexpected ways, so be prepared and ready to jump in there.
That's great. Well, Governor Hutchinson, it has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on our Game Changers event. We truly do appreciate the support that you provide to our entrepreneurial community in the form of funding and in the form of personal involvement and interest. We appreciate that you're in a very difficult situation right now from a leadership perspective, and that crisis creates the opportunity for leaders to arise, and you certainly rose to the challenge and continue to do so day in and day out. And for that, I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to be with you, and let me know how I can be helpful. God bless you.
I will do that. Thank you. And so everyone else, thank you for joining tonight. As you know, as I've said, this is the Global Entrepreneurship Week. We are leading the country in the number of events and programs that are being offered this week. So go to arconductor.org or to the Conductor's Facebook page. Thursday, we have at 1 p.m., I know we have a conversation with Congressman Womack. We are continuing to have conversations with policymakers through the week. Friday at 8:30, we have a conversation and coffee with Congressman French Hill. We encourage you to tune in for that. And then we have a bonus Game Changers on Thursday night where we'll be talking with Wayne Miller. Wayne leads the Venture Center and is very involved in our FinTech accelerators. And that'll be Thursday at 6 p.m. Thank you all so much for joining us. And once again, Governor Hutchinson, thank you for your leadership and for all you do for our state. Good night.